Hi, I'm Del from DaVincent Photography. I've had a lot of people messaging me asking how I created a set of images that I recently shared on social media. So I thought I'd just do a quick video covering the process and setup that I went through. Due to COVID lockdown, this was not my ideal setup. Rather than shooting in studio, I created them in our tiny lounge using the few pieces of equipment I happen to have left here, plus whatever I could repurpose from around the flat. The first thing I did was make the laces into small figures. Many thought this was a Photoshop manipulation, but the reality was so much simpler. A piece of thin wire can be pushed into the lace just beside the aglet and fed down inside totally hidden. Once it's in there, you can easily bend the lace into any form that you want. With the laces sorted, the next job was to get everything suspended in midair. Normally I'd mount shoes on what can only really describe as a wooden foot mounted on a stick, but I don't have that here. So I decided to try a method that we use a lot in food photography for deconstruction shots, where we hang the individual ingredients from a stand using fishing line. Unfortunately, I don't have any fishing line here either. That is sat with the wooden foot on a stick. Quick search of the flat, and the only suitable alternative that I could find was dental floss. It's thicker and much more opaque than fishing line, but even fishing line would need to be removed in Photoshop, so the floss will just require a little bit more work than that. A quick tip if you want to suspend anything in place like this. Rather than trying to tie knots in the fishing line, I use small camera thread converters stacked together. By simply clamping a line between them, it's easier to get them things where you want them in the first place, but also if you need to adjust them, it's far simpler because you don't have to undo any fiddly knots. They'll also thread straight onto any of your standard photography fittings. So the last detail left to sort is the ball. Just in case you were wondering, that is actually the ball out of a Jamie Oliver flavour shaker, which I stole from the kitchen. With everything in place composition-wise, it's time to turn to the lighting. Foremost in any lighting consideration is the mood to be conveyed. Do you want dramatic, bright, low-key, high-key, etc.? But a very important aspect in product photography is the texture and the surface of the product itself. These shoes have quite a lot of different textures on them. The weave of the fabric, the detailing on the sole, the stitching, and of course the laces. I want to make sure all of those are captured. If I were to use a large soft light source set close to the axis of the lens, these qualities wouldn't really be captured very well at all. As you can see in this example that I shot, where I've placed a large softbox just immediately above the lens. It looks pretty flat and uninteresting. The other consideration is of course the limited equipment I have to work with here at the moment. So with all these facts in mind, I started with the key light, choosing a relatively small collapsible beauty dish from Pixapro, which I have paired with their PIKA200. I've placed it high above the shoes, almost at 90 degrees to the axes of the lens, feathered slightly towards the rear. This allows me to emphasise all of those textures, create a grounding shadow, and illuminate the backdrop all at the same time. It gives a good starting point, but as it's lit from above, the underside of the sole is looking a bit dingy, and the shadows on the baseboard are a little bit heavier than I'd like. It's detracting from the fun, bright feel I want for the image. So adding a second PIKA200 aimed just below the shoe, with a standard 55-degree reflector fitted, we can really bring out the underside of that sole and use the spill to lift the shadow on the left-hand side of the baseboard at the same time. However, with just that reflector fitted, we're going to get light spill going all over the image. Adding a 10-degree grid will narrow that beam of light down, bringing most of the spill under control. We've still got a bit too much though, with the back and the sides of the shoes being quite heavily lit. A simple black flag placed between the light and the subject, carefully aligned with the edge of the sole, will cut all of those out though, leaving just the areas lit that we wanted. Once we have the key and the fill light together, we're 90% of the way there. The last things to address are a shadow on the edge of the sole that I'm not keen on, and to lift the grounding shadow on the right-hand side of the baseboard a touch. To take care of those, I'm going to add a third light using the same process that I did for the second. This time I'm going to be using a Pixapro Speedlite 580 Mark II with a 50-degree grid and another black flag to control where the light falls. And that's it. Bring all the lights together and we're ready to shoot. Because I wanted crisp, sharp focus throughout the entire depth of the image, I decided to use focus stacking. I could have closed down the lens aperture as small as it would go to give me the maximum depth of field. However, that would also introduce an unwanted element called diffraction, which actually softens the details in the textures, losing that sharpness. Focus stacking involves taking several shots with the focal plane being moved progressively further back. Once you've shot them all, software is then used to compile all of those into a single image, taking only the sharpest element from each of the shots. Once all the stack is shot, All that's left to do is some post-processing to remove the hanging wires and some fine tweaking. So there we go, that's how I went about creating these shots. As with everything photographic, it's not the only way to create these shots, it's not even the way I'd usually create these shots. However, it's good practice just to try shooting with what you've got available at the time. I certainly hope that there's been something useful for you to take away from it, so until next time, thanks for watching.